Welcome to the At Work in America show on the HR Happy Hour Network. My name's Steve Bose. I'm joined by Trish D. Trish, how are you?
I'm good, Steve. How are you?
I am well. I'm excited to be here. It's summertime, kind of almost, if not officially. It feels like it
Yeah,
in most
it feels
places.
like it.
And we're kind of doing a more casual show today. It's no guests, old school. You and I talking about something that's kind of important to us, which is exciting, which is the 15th anniversary season, and kind of within a few days or so of the 15th anniversary of the very first HR Happy Hour show way back in 2009. So we thought we'd take a few minutes, acknowledge that, talk a little bit about the show, some of the high points, where we're going with the show, maybe a little bit at the end, and certainly to thank as many as we can. There's too many to thank, but just thank everyone who's supporting the show all these years.
Yeah, I'm excited because I've been on now since January of 2013. But Steve, I went all the way back to 2009 and started listening in. I believe the first time, I know I listened to all of them. The first time I called in was on the third episode. And just to hear, and I know we'll talk a minute on sort of how it all evolved, but just to hear even what you sounded like 15 years ago. If you've not listened, Steve, I think you should
I've
go
not.
back and
I,
listen to
I
yourself.
I admit to not listening back, and I will admit to not listening back too often to any of the shows. Obviously,
Right.
we're on the show. I know what we're talking about, so I don't typically listen back to them. But yeah, maybe over the weekend I will for some fun.
I think you'd be surprised. The most surprising thing to me was I was still working, in the trenches of HR, and the things I thought were important then, not that they're not important now, but like I've kind of been out of that practitioner mode now for about 9 years. And
Mhm.
so, wow, it just took me right back to it and what I was really dealing with and the stressors and everything. And the show was such an outlet for me to think about things differently. And I know we'll talk about a lot of our guests we've had on or just people who've been supporters all these years. And wow, I learned so much. So
Mhm.
both before becoming a co-host of yours, I learned a ton. And then obviously since joining as a co-host, I've also continued to learn. So I think it's something you should be commended for.
Well,
Creating
thank
this
you for
was
that. And of course, thank you. Of course, Trish, the first
really
person I
special.
will thank is you. We won't have to talk about the two or three times you talked me out of quitting the show and just ending it. I wanted to a number of times. But we also must thank our friends at Paychex, right? Let's thank
Yeah.
them sort of second, if not first. Supporting the show, sponsoring the show for quite a number of years now. They're with us again for this coming year. Um, I can't say enough about them. Paychex.com/AWIA is our link. It's always great resources there, from buying guides to free reports, analysis. At the year end, Tom Hammond comes on and gives all the resources for folks to prepare for payroll year end and year begin, all for free, all for the community. And they're wonderful supporters of us, but also the greater HR and payroll community. So got to thank them first.
Yeah, they make it happen, really, because I don't know how familiar people are when you're doing a show. I mean, you're paying for your platform, you're paying for a lot of the marketing and things that go into production, and that's really how we get the show done. And in addition, we have so many other shows now on the podcast network, and really what they're doing is enabling us to do that as well. So not only can we sort of, bootstrap things from the beginning to give back to the HR community and to the business community more widely, but Paychex really just elevates that ability, I think.
Yeah, so absolutely, and thank you to them for all their support. So we actually did prepare some talking points, some bullet points, things we wanted to make sure we touched upon real quick. And one of the things I had talked about with our team, and I just haven't done it yet because I'm a slacker, was we've been on the show for so long and doing the things we do for a long time. Sometimes it's easy to forget we may have new or newer listeners or newer
Mhm.
followers, right? As people come into HR or as new graduates come into the field, right? And we still show up on pretty much every time someone posts like, oh, these are the top HR podcasts to listen to, kind of a thing, right? The show's always on there, which is great. And I'm appreciative of that. And I sometimes forget we probably have people listening today who are brand new. right? Or they've only had a couple of shows and don't know any of the background. So um, we wanted to share a little bit of that. This show started, as we said, 15 years ago in 2009. It was so long ago, I didn't call it a podcast. I
Right.
guess I knew what a podcast was, but I didn't realize what I was doing was a podcast, and it kind of wasn't for a while. It really started as a vehicle to record remote interviews. And since I was so low tech, I didn't really know any other way to do it. And we found a platform by which we could do that. We could have a live conversation via telephone and record that conversation and then make it available to folks later, which became the podcast. But at the beginning, it was just that. I was teaching a class at the time, and I was interviewing, leaders in the field in HR and in HR tech to make those interviews available to the class, right? As a kind of like an assignment, if you will. And that morphed into a way at the time was also the evolution and the growth of Twitter primarily, right? As a mechanism for folks to connect both professionally and personally and socially. And there was a really vibrant HR Twitter community at that time, which lasted quite a number of years, but certainly back in 2009, there was lots of activity on Twitter specifically around HR and people conversing around HR. So we used the platform that I had set up for other reasons, right? To sort of
Right.
take some of that online connecting and online conversations and breathe a little more life into them, essentially, right? Make them more real by virtue of actually having conversation. There was no video. We weren't doing anything on video. It was just audio and via phones, but we could do interviews. We could have call-ins. We could do all the things with this platform that we still use now to actually host the show. And that's how it started. It really started by really on accident, and then I just happened to have a platform that could do the kinds of things that people wanted to do, and that's really the only reason I became the host of HR Happy Hour. If I'm honest about it.
I I love how it started and why, Steve. And I think too, one of the takeaways for anyone maybe who is more junior in your career and you're listening to this, many of the things that we have talked about over the years, including you starting this, you don't have to have a master plan, right? So just don't wait. If there's something, if you want to use your voice in some way, whether that's written form, whether it's, audio, video, whatever, do it. Just start it, right? You can always, we've changed. We're going to talk about the evolution of the podcast. We've morphed it in so many ways over the years. But yeah, those early days, I do remember meeting, I'm doing air quotes, people on Twitter and thinking, wow, I have little kids, so I'm not out networking in real life at that point. So that was my network. That became my people I talked to. And really kind of the most you could do then was just get like on a conference call with two or three people
Yeah.
and have a conversation. So what you did was you blew that up. You amplified that to, tens of people, as you kind of allude to early on, but very quickly to hundreds of people, right? We would have you did a live show. It was every Thursday night. I remember, like, it didn't matter if my son had football practice or if I was working late or whatever. I mean, I was calling in to
Mhm.
hear that show.
Yeah.
So
It was
super
basically
important.
like a live radio show
Yeah.
on the internet. So we did that for a long time. We did that for a couple of years. Somewhere around episode 100, or maybe right around episode 100, after a couple of years of doing that, we took the show from the live iteration and we made it what's now classically considered the podcast format, which everybody knows now, but back then nobody knew, or
Right.
fewer people knew. And we've been doing them pre-recorded ever since. The podcast itself, as you mentioned, just has evolved as well, right? The original HR Happy Hour still exists in podcast form. We added the At Work in America podcast, which is the title of this show today. We have other podcasts that post on our network as well. And we've evolved in terms of content, topics, themes. We've done so many shows now we stopped counting them, right?
Right.
But I know we've evolved in really trying to get into, especially on the Outwork in America show, really trying to learn more about the people, right? And their stories and their experiences at work, and we still have room and space for things like AI and the latest in technology and employee engagement trends and those things. We still have room and space for those on the network, and we do those things. But on our show, on the Outwork in America show specifically, we've been able to really get into some super interesting stories in the last couple of years, which I'm pretty proud of too.
Yeah. I think that we've had to change and grow as the needs were changing and growing, right? We still, you mentioned the HR Happy Hour podcast itself. That still exists, but we got to the point where like we want to talk about things beyond technology,
Mhm.
right? And so, but we didn't want to lose the technology piece either. So we still do those HR Happy Hour classic type episodes where we really are digging in on the technology, on the architecture, sort of why it's built the way it's built and what it can achieve. And you'll see those more actually as live when we're at events. As I've looked back over the years of all these shows, and we're actually approaching our 4 millionth download,
Mhm.
which is amazing to me.
Mhm.
We're very, very lucky. And I'll even say we're blessed that we have that much support over the years on what we're doing. But you're right. It's about I guess it's 3.5 years ago that we kind of added that brand about work in America. And we've covered like a recent one I know that we would have never covered was about menopause
Yeah.
and how employers can help so many women in the workplace, right? Who actually start into perimenopause like in their 30s. I didn't even know that until we had a show about it, right? So when you think about shows like that or around hiring people who are maybe typically not your first thought, right? Someone who might have neurodiversity or different physical challenges or formerly incarcerated or veterans, you name it, right? We've done sort of all those shows and tried to open up the way that people think about what work should look like. How do we be more inclusive?
And I think we were somewhat either, if not ahead of the game, early into the game on some of those things. I just saw even
Yeah.
this morning. I didn't read it yet, but I bookmarked it this morning in HBR and Harvard Business Review. There's a piece today about making your interviewing process more accessible for people who are
Mhm.
neurodiverse. And I'm thinking, man, we've done like 5 shows on that. The first one was probably 4 years ago, right? So I think it's great that it's
Yeah.
being covered in lots and lots of places, but I'm also a little bit proud, I'll allow us to say, of some of the things we've done in those areas too.
I think because it's our show and we embrace like we can talk about what we want when we want and whether that ties to work or not, that's up to us. But and often it does. But I'll give you another one, Steve. I was watching CBS, I don't know, I think it was Saturday morning and like a week ago Saturday. And they were showing an upcoming interview they were going to be doing with the Gentle Barn,
Oh,
which
doing
there are
that.
several locations, but one of them is outside of St. Louis. And it's been years ago since we did that show where
I would
we
say
really
three
went
summers
out,
ago, we went out to the
yeah, a
gym.
couple summers.
Yeah.
And for anyone who hasn't listened, please go back and listen to the Gentle Barn show. But it's really about how these rescued animals are used in therapeutic ways with whether it's children who have come from really difficult, abusive homes, working with elderly who just need to be able to go and hug a cow,
Yeah.
right? But you can also bring your workforce out to do these things. And so it was fun to see that, okay, now CBS, Sunday morning or whatever is going to be getting on the bandwagon and like interviewing who we did years ago. So anyway,
Yeah,
it's
Trish, I'm
fun.
glad you brought that up. I'd totally forgotten about that. I mean, I remember it now, of course. It
We
was quite,
hugged cows.
we did. We ought to maybe reach out to those folks and maybe go back out there again. That was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. And I mean, even things like we went out to the farm, Warm Springs Ranch, right?
Right.
Where the famous Budweiser Clydesdales are actually born and raised right before they go
Right.
into their training to become the famous Clydesdales you see on Super Bowl commercials and holiday commercials. So, an awesome experience as well. So we've done a lot of cool things like that. That's a little bit of the backstory of the podcast. We are sort of evolving all the time. We've got some new things coming up, even now. But we wanted to talk also, Trish, since again, it's our show, right? I'll throw this one to you first. And I got a couple thoughts, but we thought we should hit what were a couple of memorable episodes that stand out in your mind? Just like, I don't know, one, two, three, however many you want.
Yeah, I'm going to run through them really quick because, again, I didn't go back and listen to everything. That'd be impossible to do. But
Don't do
I
that.
kind of went all the way back to the beginning. So it's not even necessarily when I was your co-host, okay? Shauna Morkey was your first co-host. And one of my favorite shows, I know you get sick of me telling you, was Matt Stillman. The show episode for anyone interested is called Creative Approaches.
Okay.
And I was I was here as at home and I was struggling with one of my kids not seeming as grateful as I thought they should be or could be. And Matt was this guest you had where we could call in and ask those questions, and he was giving us creative approaches to all of our problems. So fascinating show. One I loved, and again, I wasn't the co-host officially, but I was co-host on the show, was Live from Gettysburg. We
Yes,
went
Gettysburg.
we went to Gettysburg with a training group, I guess you would call it, a leadership training
Yeah,
group,
experiential training and experiential
experiential
learning,
training.
technically, I think you'd call it.
So
Yeah.
we had gone through, 2.5 days of crawling on our bellies through the woods and the leaves and, twigs in our hair and everything else, learning about Gettysburg and actually feeling it and experiencing it. And then we recorded the podcast live from Gettysburg.
Yeah.
It just gives me chills. The last one I'm going to say that was super important to me, there's so many. There's so many fun ones. Our HR horror stories, things like that are fun. But the very first one we did, again, I was not a co-host. I like how I picked none that I was a co-host of now that I'm looking at it, was HR Evolution. So I think it was about episode 5 or 6 of the
Wow.
podcast.
That's
And
way back.
several of us, again, had decided, you know what, conferences are too expensive. We're going to just start our own. We're just going to band together and start our own. And it was not just the birth of HR Evolution as an event, which we had 9 of them over the years, which I love, but it was more of like the movement behind that. And so many people over the years have maintained those connections they made through that event and through that HR Evolution community. So those are my favorites. What about you? I mean, we've got so many to pick from.
I just kind of used my memory, honestly. I didn't really go
Okay.
back to the archive too closely. Certainly one I had talked about in the past as being my favorite show at some point, and it's certainly among my favorites, was we had the author and Professor Sherry Turkle on the show some years back.
Yeah.
And she had written a book at the time, a recent book at the time, it was called Alone Together. And it was really one of the most earliest kind of looks at the effects of technology, ubiquitous use of smartphones, ubiquitous connectivity, social media a little bit even back then, and the impacts those were having on kids, like kind of pre-teens, teens, and even into the teenage years. And that was the focus of her research. Remarkably interesting book. And she was a fantastic guest talking about the book. I hadn't reread the book in a long time. The book's probably now 15 years old as well, or close to that. But at the time, I thought, boy, this is really awesome because we've got this MIT professor doing this really, really important research on an important topic that I was curious about, but also one that was certainly important to not just people in their considerations in the workplace, but also just in their lives and how they might be dealing with their own kids. And I thought, boy, that's really a cool thing that we could do. So that was one. Then, and if I look back to, we were definitely, even before we sort of spun off the podcast, we were still doing some interesting things and out of the box things. And I had connected with an author. You probably will remember her, Trish. Her name was Kaya Oakes, who's still around, still writing books. And
Yeah.
at the time, I was one of those people who was always like, oh, I liked alternative music and all that. And so I had read her book, her one of her early books, what happened about the alternative music scene, of which
Okay.
she was a part of. She was a journalist, and it was just a chronicle of that scene. And I somehow tried to finagle a way to tie that into the world of work and the workplace. I doubt I did effectively, but I had her on to talk about the book. She was, I think, stunned when I reached out to her. She had no idea who I was or what this
Right.
was, but she did the show and she was great. And the book is great too. And then years later, she came out with another book, which was about religion.
Mhm.
And we had her on again to talk
Right.
about that. And so, again, not a normal topic for our show, but a super interesting conversation. And so I thought maybe we'd reach out to her again. I did look her up just to double check on this
Good.
for this show.
Yeah.
She's got a new book coming out in July. Kaya
This
does.
is perfect.
It's on forgiveness, right? And so
Ooh.
kind of the thesis of the book, I just read the blurb on Amazon. The book comes out in July. Was that maybe we shouldn't always be so quick to forgive, right? Like we are sort of trained and accultured, and there's a little bit of a religious undertone as well for forgiveness and expressing forgiveness and granting forgiveness. And I think the thesis and the idea in the book, and again, I have not read this book, it's not out yet, but is maybe we ought to rethink some of that. So I'm fascinated to get that book when it comes out, and we'll try to get her back on the show, I think.
I love it. You know, it's funny is I didn't know what you were going to choose as your favorites and you didn't know mine, but when you think of all the ones that we're choosing, it's nothing that is immediately makes you think of work, workplace, or technology. So I do think that is something that's helped everyone learn, not just us, but by bringing in whether it's authors or speakers, even those in our industry, Dave Ulrich, we've had him on the show several times.
Dave's
I mean,
great. Dave is great.
gosh, you know, when it comes to human resources and understanding the workplace, he's excellent at that. So, but I like that we've always sort of done our own thing. Yes, it's about HR. Yes, it's about work, but we do it our way, right? We've done a lot of shows on basketball, on other sports.
We did
I look back,
sports.
Steve, we've
Covered.
had politics.
Mhm.
We've covered politics and religion have been
Yeah, we've
covered.
we've laid off politics in the last 2 years, probably on purpose, and I'm not sure
Yeah,
I'm wanting to go back there, but I do. We talk about unions and
covered it.
labor a lot too, and that is an important issue, and that does have a
There you
tinge of
go.
political angles to it. But
Sure.
is there someone you'd like to have back on the show? I mentioned Kaya. I'll try to get back on the show. Is there someone we had on
Gosh,
that you'd
you
say,
know,
oh, let's get that person back?
there are so many good people. I was thinking back to this. Actually, I do have an answer. It's Don Weinstein.
Oh, well,
Friend
we
Don.
are. Go
So
a
here's
meeting with
why.
Don.
So if anyone's been listening to this show for a long time, we have several people who are like five timers or more, right? Kind of the five timers club. And there is a gift that they all get. It's not like the green jacket, you know, that the PGA gives for the
Not
Masters,
quite as
but
prestigious.
but it's a set of steak knives that are very nice, right? You get
You
the
know
HR
why
Happy
it's
Hour
a set of
steak
steak
knife.
knives?
I have no idea, really.
It's
Why
from
is
it's a reference to Glenn Ross, to
oh
the, the Alec Baldwin stuff where
yeah,
he's, yeah, lecturing the salesman, right?
sure.
Second place
Yeah.
is a set of steak knives. So yeah.
Second place is a set of steak knives. Well, anyway, so can I just mention? So we talked about Don Weinstein. We've had Gretchen Allercon, Cecile Alper LaRue, Ben Brooks, and Lisa Sterling have all been on five or more times. And the reason that I think they're important is because these are people who have remained relevant over the last 15 years as their careers have just taken very different twists and turns, and they've worked with different companies and in different roles. And so I just feel like we haven't caught up with Don for a while. He had been an executive with ADP for a very long time, and he's now in a very new, exciting role. So I think it's time we get Don back on the show.
We will talk to him soon, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact. Yeah, that's great. I think those are all great people, and honestly, there's a reason why we've had them on so many times, right?
right.
And they have a lot to say. They're interesting. They're friends of ours. They're cool. So yeah, so we've got a couple shows coming up to kind of acknowledge that. So we'll have some of those OG folks that you mentioned on. We'll have a few other kind of interesting folks from back in the day, the early days of the show on. We'll do a little
That's right.
retrospective. We'll be recording those shows in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Trish, is there a dream guest? Okay, I know we have had quite a few out of the box guests. Is there someone
Can you
workplace,
guess?
not
Wait, can you,
workplace? I do.
you
I
know
think
me.
I do think I know who you're going to say.
We did not talk about who do you think I would pick?
I think you're going to say the host of Survivor, Jeff
Yes.
Probst.
Yes, I want Jeff Probst on the show. I don't know. I don't know what my fascination is with Survivor, but it's on Pluto TV now, like 24/7 on the Survivor channel. And it's just sort of like, you know, we work at home. I've worked at home for 9 years now, and it can get quiet. So I need something on in the background. Sometimes it's not music. It's got to be just something that I'm not going to just sit there and get sucked into because I don't want to watch TV while I'm working. So I put Survivor on. So Jeff Probst, you're my coworker, my colleague. I want him on the show. You know why too? I think with Survivor, and he has his own podcast called On Fire, which is excellent, where he talks all about the show with different contestants. But I think what's fascinating is watching how Survivor morphs into they've done specific seasons, for example, based on the type of worker you are. I was
Interesting.
just rewatching one the other day where it was like white collar versus blue collar versus
Oh,
no collar, like a whole season.
what are the no
So
collar people? They're just hanging.
like the free spirits, like
Oh,
people
gotcha.
who maybe they're artists or maybe they do their own thing, right? Musicians, things like that, where maybe you're an exercise guru, whatever. But I think that they've always done a good job of getting people of all ages, right? They always incorporate different generations, all backgrounds, all ethnicities, and then finally, all different types of workers.
Yeah,
And sometimes
it
people
is
disclose what they
interesting, and
do and some don't.
it is not just a survivor thing, right? It's more of a
Right.
reflection on American society, though. But I do know this on Survivor and many other of these kinds of shows.
Yeah.
When they have like an interview or a little confessional with one of the
Mhm.
contestants, it'll say Mary Jane, comma, 37 years old, and right under it, it'll say whatever her job is,
What her job is, right?
marketing or sales or waitress, whatever it is, right?
Whatever.
We're
Yeah.
the things we do for work are such a like the three pieces of her identity that Survivor producers think we should be reminded of when we see her: her
Right.
name, her age, and what her job is. It's
Right. I
fascinating.
would like, why aren't we asking, like, her name, her age, and what her favorite movie is, or her
Yeah.
favorite band, or her favorite
Or color.
color, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's so random as to why and when we introduce ourselves to people, one of the first things you're asked is, well, what do you do?
Yeah, it's usually in question number two or three, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So I do think that it is fun to think about from a show perspective. I know we're kind of talking also about plans for the future, but it's like work is so ingrained in everything we do, that I do think it's important, and you can morph it any way you want to.
Yeah.
What about you? Favorite dream
I'll
guest?
give you two. One is way out of the box. We'll never get this person, and
Okay,
one
now
one we have a shot
I'm
at.
in on it.
So the best book I've read in the last few years, a couple
Okay.
of years, is a book called Clara and the Sun. It's a novel, and that's Clara with a K,
Okay.
Klara, Clara and the Sun, by Kazuo Ishiguro, Trish, who is a Japanese author who has won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He has
Oh,
written a number of very famous books, including The Remains of the Day, which
oh, right.
became a movie, and another
Mhm.
book called, which I'm reading now, called Never Let Me Go, which also became a movie. But
Okay.
Clara and the Sun came out a couple years ago, and it was on, like, top lists of the year kind of thing. And at the end of the year, a couple years ago, I picked it up, and it's really it's a novel all about artificial intelligence, and it's set in kind of a near distant fictional future where um, ch artificial intelligence robots, essentially humanoid though, they look just like people, are developed to become companions for children. Okay.
Oh,
And so the
okay.
story, Clara is the robot, or they call them artificial friends in the book, and
Oh,
she gets adopted, essentially purchased, but they adopted into a family where she becomes the artificial friend of a girl who has had a lot of issues with her health and things like that. And it's a longish story, and it's a great story though, but it really makes you think a lot and really hard about where technology is going, what it suggests about us and our relationship with technology. And it's fascinating. It's a good story as well. So I thought, oh man, this is the best thing I've read in years. And then I looked up the author, who I didn't even really know, but oh, Nobel Prize for Literature. That's probably why the book is so good. So I'm right now reading Never Let Me Go, which is an older book. It's probably a 15-year-old book itself, but I never read it.
okay.
So I started that. So that's my dream guest. We'll probably not be able to make that happen. The
We'll
other
try.
guest, though, Trish, is somebody similar to Jeff Probst, someone we've seen on our TV screens for many years. And I've actually met because he keynoted at HR Tech a few years ago, which is Mike Rowe. So
Oh, dirty jobs.
most famous for Dirty Jobs. He also has a series called How America Works, which is similar-ish to the concepts in Dirty Jobs. He keynoted HR Tech before the pandemic, so 17 or 18 or 19. I can't remember what year, but we got to meet him, got to hang out with him. Super nice guy, great stories, great point of view about the value of the skilled trades and the blue collar jobs that you mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
And not everybody should necessarily go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, right, for a college
Right.
degree. There's lots of other options out there. And certainly that happens. We see this still in industries in the US today. There are lots of those kinds of jobs that have shortages of workers, and more Gen Z people. I did a couple workplace minutes on this topic recently. More and more Gen Z people are
Mhm.
choosing to go into those fields for a multitude of reasons. But it turns out Mike Rowe's probably been right all along on a lot of the things he's been saying for years and years.
Right.
And he was and on top of all that, nicest person I've ever met in the context
Oh,
of famous people coming to do keynotes at our conferences.
right.
Absolutely a gem, wonderful guy. So yeah, Mike Rowe would be a guy I'd love to have on the podcast.
Excellent. Well, you got two. Can I do one more?
Yeah.
So, I won't go into it, but I had the opportunity to meet Randy Travis and his lovely wife Mary not too long ago and spend time with them at their ranch. And for anyone who doesn't know Randy Travis, obviously country music, Hall of Fame gem,
Yeah.
but his wife, Mary, actually, she's from Texas. She's from Plano. And I think she would be a good guest on the show. And here's why. She actually went to Baylor and studied marketing.
Okay.
And and she had worked in that, out of college and whatnot and done some, fairly significant jobs. But once she got married to Randy, she's really managed his career. And he had a stroke about, I think it was in 2013.
Okay.
And so when you look at someone, we've talked about caregiving, for example, just as how that relates to us as workers. But when you think about it's not only your loved one, but it's someone that you're help managing their career, right? When they need a caregiver. So it's being able to use sort of the skills that she went to school for that we always think like, wow, okay, we're trying to use the skills we went and maybe got a degree in or trade school or whatnot. But then how do you morph that when life circumstances change? I think it's a fascinating story if we could ever get her on. So she'd be
Yeah,
a
you should make the ask.
guest too. Yeah. So Mary Travis, she's awesome.
Yeah, so we got some. So we'll try to see if we can make some of those things happen in the next year or so. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's been Trish. Plans for the future was the last thing we wanted to talk about. We're doing more video probably as we get into this year more and going forward, and that's no surprise given what's happened in content and in media in general, right? And we'll probably look to do even more of that in the back half of this year, especially once we get out into the fall season of events and conferences. And we bought some new equipment that I need to learn how to use before I'm going out to Sherm for a day. So I'll
I
try to do some
know.
things there with the camera. Hopefully I can figure it out. But
Got
I think
this.
that's one thing, we're going to try to do is try to evolve our presentation a little bit to try to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of evolving the show, we've tried to do a really good job over the years. You mentioned at the top, we have other shows in the network. It's become more than just our podcast or your original podcast. It's now a network. Of course, we have the two shows we talked about. You did mention you do the Workplace Minute, so a little 2 to 3 minute shorter version of a podcast, right, on Amazon Alexa as well. We do
Also
the
on
H
YouTube.
on YouTube as
Yeah,
well.
it's going out to YouTube now. Yeah.
Yeah, we do H3 Live, also on YouTube as well.
Mhm.
But we also have I want to say just a shout out to all of our co-hosts
Yeah.
because we have George Larac, who has been doing this for years now with Work Tech. Madeline Lorano does Radical Research, where she talks about all of the research she's doing, but also she's a talent acquisition specialist. So when, not that you and I don't ever do a talent acquisition show, but boy, if you want to deep dive, that's catch her shows. Sarah Morgan, the Inclusion Crusade. Sarah has been doing this for a few years with us too, and I swear it's like when you listen to the first episode till now, she is a phenomenal interviewer.
Yeah, she's
It's
great.
it's such a career building skill when you start doing podcasts as part of your day job, if you will. So hers are great. Mervyn Denon has been doing it for a couple years with us now on HR Means Business. He's based in London, covers a lot of what's going on in both Great Britain as well as Europe and even how that impacts kind of global organizations, but with the European twist. And then one of my favorites, The Play by Play, which is our Gen Z podcast with host Jack McFarlane, my son, and Nick Schlemmer, my nephew. So they just recorded yesterday, as a matter of fact, and it's not out yet. But like, I think, they've been doing it about a year and a half. And again, as Nick is 20, almost 23 here in a couple days, Jack is 20. To hear how they have improved their interviewing skills, they're doing real hard-hitting shows on things like finance. They've done them also on some of the trades,
Mhm.
with carpentry and other, whether you choose to go into the military if you don't go to college, like there are just other outlets. So they're kind of the perfect guys to talk about that, I think.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, everyone's talking about Gen Z, including me. I talk about it a lot on some of the
Yeah.
media that we do, and it's good to hear actual Gen Z people talking about how they feel, how they think, what's on their mind, and what's important to them. So
Yeah.
I love that show as well. Those guys are doing a great job. So yeah, everyone's doing a really good job, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited for where we're going. We've got a couple of like kind of retrospective shows coming up with some of the guests that Trish mentioned and some other guests coming up. So that's really exciting as well. I do want to say real quick, just before we go, happy Pride Month. Pride has started in
Oh,
June. I
happy
did wear
Pride
my
Month.
Pride shirt today, and so we will probably be doing some stuff on that soon too. So anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks again, everyone, for bearing with us for all these years. It's been quite a ride, and we'd love to hear from you as well. You can find us easily on LinkedIn. You can find us on, I'm still on X, although I don't check it as much as I used to, but
Threads, Facebook,
yeah,
YouTube.
everywhere. I have a TikTok
Favorite
now,
Pride
even Trish. That's ridiculous. Um, you can find us there, and hrhappyhour.net is the place where all the shows, all the network stuff all comes together. So, Trish, thank to you for almost 15 years of great partnership on this.
Thank you. No, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for creating this. I know, again, if you're new to listening to this, at least go back and check out an episode from 2009. It really doesn't even matter which one because they're actually really, really good. I think the only thing, can we talk about one thing? We talked about evolution of the show. The music has evolved quite a bit. I personally, my favorite intro music you ever had was was it Come On Get Happy? I don't know if that's the technical name of the song.
I
It was
think it
because
might
it was the
be.
happy hour.
That's
Yeah, I
the
loved that. But
Partridge
you
Family.
went through like you started, yeah, Partridge Family. But at first it was a very like hard rock music at the
Yeah,
beginning. Then you've kind of done alternative for a while. And so I think as you've grown and morphed, it's also morphed with you.
yeah. Now I only listen to Kentucky Bluegrass, so that's it.
Oh, well, sounds like we're going to need a new
Yes.
song maybe for
All right.
2025.
Good stuff. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Go to hrhappy.net. Thanks to our friends at Paychex. Thank you, Trish. And thank you, Karen Steed, of course, our producer. She does a wonderful job. And
It does.
yeah, that's it. I think we're done.